Hello, and welcome to today's virtual happy hour tour. I am Brenda with AARP Arizona. We are the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence and nearly 38 million members across the nation and approximately 900,000 right here in Arizona, we work to strengthen our communities and we advocate for what matters most to families: health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment, to name a few. In May, AARP helps consumers know what they can do to protect themselves and their loved ones from fraud. Two areas of focus will be gift cards as a form of payment and scams, and narrative change to social change. ARP is your wise friend with resources to help consumers spot and avoid scams, and a fierce defender that is advocating for better protections on your behalf. Please visit us at aarp.org/Fraud Watch Network. Thank you again, and with that, I will turn it over to Marshall.
Folks, welcome to the show. Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore.
Well, hello and good evening. I want to welcome you all to Arizona History Happy Hour. I'm so happy you can be here. Have we got a great show for you this evening? Oh my gosh, just you wait and see the fun we've got coming down the pike. So my name is Marshall Shore, and I want to welcome you all, no matter how you're watching, whether it's Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. So there are so many ways. We're also archived on YouTube, so you can go back if you've missed an episode and watch an episode. So lots of ways to interact. Well, today is March 11th. And so with that, back in 1940, the Knights of Columbus held their 33rd annual meeting in Nogales. And I wanted to highlight that because, those fraternal organizations, Knights of Columbus, Masonic Lodge, Knights of Pythias, so many of those groups were quite important in the early days of Arizona and are still thriving today. And some of their tenets are really community and charity. They're all philanthropic. And so it's a great way to get involved in your community or just to help with your community as well. Now, it is also a day where we can observe to eat anything you want. So maybe you have been good since New Year's. Do you remember that holiday way back when where you might have said, I'm going to be on a diet? Have you held to that? Well, today is a day where we can all kind of just eat whatever we want. I think it's also interesting that it's also Hostess Cupcake Day, because back in Indianapolis, back on May 10th, 1919, cupcakes were delivered. And so they were first sold on May 11th. And so there we go. We have a celebration for those iconic cupcakes with that white squiggle of icing across that chocolate frosting. Oh my gosh. All right. So it is also National Foam Roller Day. As people get a more and more sedentary lifestyle, I think people aren't really, I know I'm not moving as much as I was. Even so, these are a great way to get circulation, a little bit of muscle relief. And so if you haven't tried it, maybe today is a day where you should go out, not right now. You want to wait till after happy hour, and then you come out and grab yourself a foam roller. Now, it is also National Twilight Zone Day. And, don't really know why, because it's not celebrating Rod Serling's birth nor death, nor when that show was first aired. But, that iconic TV show that I'm sure somebody is now running because of it being National Twilight Zone Day, I'm sure there's a marathon on somewhere. So what can you expect from tonight's show? Well, we've got a little Arizona. We've got some music history coming up, as well as From the Vault, which is actually kind of why we're pre-recording today. So you're watching tonight, you're watching something that we did earlier today. We also have some trivia coming up, as well as a beverage, and of course, a special guest. So if this is your first time watching, you might wonder, who is that man and why is he on my screen? Well, my name is Marshall Shore, and I got here about 23 years ago. I was living and working in Brooklyn in a beautiful Carnegie building and decided to trade it all for sunshine. Because, you can't shovel sunshine. And traded all for a little library in South Phoenix, which had this rich oral tradition of the community. And so through that, I really started learning about Arizona through stories, and still continuing that today. As soon as we got to Arizona, we promptly moved into a beautiful 1956 ranch. I'm happy to say it is not beige, 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 beige. It is now seafoam and cantaloupe. And there's what my kitchen looks like today. All that buttercream yellow tile, all that original cabinetry. It is a time capsule by design. And so that's been one of the issues of trying to keep it like that as well. But so as soon as we got to Arizona, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. But, I knew that wasn't true, because every time I went on my bike, in a car, on a bus, on a scooter, wherever, I kept running into so many amazing people, places, and stories. And so just retelling those stories and adding more to it got us where we are today, right now. Now, as the hip historian, I get to do all kinds of fun things with Arizona history. Why, coming up this weekend down in Bisbee, a great way to celebrate Mother's Day is dinner and a seance at the iconic Greenway House. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So come on down and join us. I think there are still tickets left for that. We also have coming up the end of this month, our last tour of the season, because it's going to get a little too toasty to be able to walk around downtown. So you can find that on hiphistorian.com. As well as later this month, we are doing, for Asian Heritage Month, we are doing a luncheon over at Stone Tofu House. You can sign up also at hiphistorian.com and for more information as well. And I see some of you have already found the chat session, but please feel free, if you don't want to put something in the chat, you can throw it out to me via Facebook, Instagram, email, website. I love to hear from you. That's how I get some of my best stories, is from you saying, hey, what about this person? So now we're ready for Little Arizona. So last weekend, I was on a little adventure. I went up to Kingman, Arizona, for the 34th annual fun run. And so we went from Seligman to Kingman, and then Kingman to Topak. And it was so much fun. There were over 800, I think there were 850 cars, I think maybe even exactly. And so I just happened to be with a group of electric vehicles. And so that was a really fun time. But let's talk a little bit about Kingman and the fact that it was really founded back in 1883, and it was really founded as a railway town. So you can see right here this is the Kingman Railway Museum. They have model trains, and they are getting ready to, not this weekend, but next weekend, they are hosting their second annual model train show. So go down, check it out. If you're interested in model trains, they'll have all kinds of fun stuff. Now, Kingman was actually named for the surveyor, Lewis Kingman, that worked for the road and positioned it right where it is. And so it was famous for trains that really quickly it became a shipping center for miners and ranchers throughout western Arizona. And then around 1915, the old National Trail was coming through Kingman. That became Route 66. And that highway really kind of made Kingman an economic engine. People driving through, needing hotels, needing goods, as well as just people living to support all of that. So it really was a boom. And then when the highway was built, 40, that started going away. So Kingman has now been reestablishing itself as kind of a epicenter of Route 66. And so they have all kinds. I mean, it was so great to be up there this weekend. Main Street was really cool, full of all kinds of art shops, really focusing on bringing the arts in. There was an old theater that they're turning back into an old theater. It's had various lives, and so they're now redoing it as a community theater. So that's going to be really cool. So it's great to see that just exploding. The powerhouse has been turned into a visitor center, and that's where you can find the EV Electric Vehicle Museum. There's also charging stations right there. And so it was really cool to get a chance to see kind of electric vehicles. And we're looking at doing something with kind of talking about more of the history of electric vehicles right here in Arizona. This is a 1959 Dauphine that had been converted for GE to electric. And so you also have all those iconic golf cars. So, go check out Kingman. It was such a fun day. Actually, a fun 3 days. Being in Kingman, enjoying Route 66, not just EVs, but also all those classic cars. So many. I mean, there was a Henry J. The best of show was an early 60s Vet. I mean, so many cool cars running along there. And really, we were also there. It was First Friday, and so they do an art walk downtown. That was a lot of fun, seeing all the shops open, being able to walk in them. So check out Kingman. All right. And now we are to the beverage portion of our show. And so, PJ, thank you so much. So when I told him what we were doing, that we were going to talking about preservation, because indeed May is Preservation Month, he was like, have I got the beer for you? So we are tonight enjoying Salt River Salt and Lime. Oh, it doesn't like that can at all. All right. Well, hello, blue screen or green screen. And so basically, whether you're in Mexico or in a tube floating down the Salt River, this may suit you just fine. What I love about Historic Brewing Company is the fact that they're located on Route 66 in Flagstaff, and they do donate a portion of their sales to conservation and preservation. Oh, indeed. I can see why that is quite popular. All right. All right. So now we are on to our next portion of the show. All right. And now I'm excited to say that this is a chance where you get to hear from someone else other than just me, because this is when we get to bring on our oh so special guest. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have my friend Ashley on. Hello.
Hi. Hello. How are you?
I am great. And yourself?
I'm very good. I'm so excited to be able to come and talk to you today.
Indeed. We're going to have so much fun. So, Ashley, for folks that don't know much about you, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I am, my name's Ashley Harder. I have a small real estate development company. I focus mainly on adaptive reuse and historic preservation projects that are pretty much close to the downtown core of Phoenix. I like working in historic neighborhoods, historic commercial corridors. Basically, I really have developed through the years a passion for old buildings and all the opportunities that are, that exist with working with older spaces to adapt them or to preserve or to do both. And so through all that love, I kind of became an accidental advocate of historic preservation. And I started advocating for neighborhood issues, community issues, and around historic preservation because they really, they go hand in hand. And I joined Preserve Phoenix, Phoenix's only historic preservation advocacy organization, about a year ago, and have been working with them on getting the message out, creating some clear communication around what's preservation and how do we engage with it right now as we're growing our urban city. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a huge eye-opening, big lesson, high learning curve. It's very different than just doing the work of preservation itself. But I've really enjoyed it because it's, connected me to so many people and cool projects and things that are happening around the city. Yeah.
All right. So we are getting ready to do some trivia. And so here on Happy Hour, our trivia is a little bit different. If you've been to bar trivia, all they care about is, do you know the answer, and on to the next thing. Well, here at Happy Hour, we want to know the story. So what we do is we go through our trivia. It's either multiple choice, true or false. So you don't have to just come up blankly with an answer.
Okay.
You can choose. And so we've got some great questions coming up. Now you can keep track of it. Some folks do it in the chat. Some folks do it. I know my friend Anita has a special notebook. So whatever you do it in, you go for it. It's all about the stories and just learning. So without any further ado, let's start off with question 1. All right. So we know, so this month right now, we are in National Historic Preservation Month. And so it begs the question, what is historic preservation? Is it A, protecting buildings, B, identifying historical sites, C, preserving architecture, or D, enhancing places? All right. So which one of those do you think is historic preservation? All right. Moving on to question 2. Who works in historic preservation? Architects. A, craftspeople and tradespeople. B, historians. C, D, economic development agents. Which one of those do you think work in historic preservation? We're never known for trick questions at all. Question 3. Why does historic preservation matter? A, it honors our diverse heritage. B, supports sound community planning and development. C, keeps historic resources for the benefit of future generations. Or D, maintains community character. So why do you think historic preservation matters? All right, question 4. True or false, historic preservation preserves public history? Is that A, true, or B, false? Question 5. What is the new name of the Pueblo Grande Museum in Phoenix? A, the Waterway Museum. B, Museum of Time. C, Sedva Vaaki Museum. D, Phoenix History Museum. So which one of those do you think is the Pueblo Grande Museum kind of rebranding as? All right, on to question 6. True or false, if something is designated as historic, does that mean that it can't be altered, changed, or demolished? Is that true or false? Oh, that's going to be a good one, I have a feeling. All right, question 7. What does being on the National Register of Historic Places even mean? Oh, good question. All right, is it A, a building cannot be demolished? B, a site cannot be altered? C, it honors the site? Or D, it recognized by the National Park Service? All right, question 8. What is partial preservation? Parts of the site are reused on other sites? For A. B, part of the building is preserved. C, the roof line is preserved. Or D, only pieces the owner is partial to are saved. Which one of those do you think is partial preservation? All right. What is a facadectomy? Oh, that sounds painful, whatever it is. Okay.
It is.
B, lift for the owners. B, the facade is enhanced. C, the facade is removed. Or D, the facade is used. All right. Question 10. What is adaptive reuse in historic preservation? A site is made wheelchair accessible. B, elevators are added. C, a change from the original use. Or D, enhanced to be more eco-friendly. So which one of those terms do you think best describes adaptive reuse for historic preservation? All right, and now we're going to play a little bit of a new game. So, old or historic? Do you think this building pictured here is old or historic? All right. What about this building? Do you think it's old or historic? And then this lovely little greenhouse, old or historic? And pretty much what looks to be a pile of dirt. What do you think it could be? Is it just an old pile of dirt or historic pile of dirt? All right. Well, you're locking in your final answers. We are going to take a little bit of an Arizona music break. And so we are going to talk about a band called Basic Elements. Now they build themselves as the greatest band you've never heard of. They grew up in Phoenix from 84 through the 90s. They had a penchant for new wave music and Aquanetta. There's a name for you with so much history behind that as well. They played in a variety of places like the Mason Jar, the Sun Club, Edsell's Attic, even the Arizona State Fair, and many backyard parties when the parents were out of town. They disbanded in, not that we ever did that. No.
Nope.
Disbanded in the early 90s. They just had a relaunch of a concert. They are in heavy rotation on 90.9 K-Swiss FM, alternative Arizona music. And so they were part of a fundraiser recently at Last Exit Live, which is down on Central near Buckeye. So
it's on South Central, right? It's right where, it's right before, south of downtown.
Yes, exactly. Just south of downtown. And so in the early 60s, that space was a laundromat.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
And then it became a bar. It became a variety of bars. When I was down in that neck of the woods, it was Big Al's. Then I think the Ruby Room. Okay. And so I love
it was the Ruby Room.
Yeah. I mean, I just love how it's kind of found this new lease on life and just keeps going and getting better and better. And now you have a band that's been revived and a space that's been revived.
Yeah, it's a definitely adaptive reuse building. I'll give the answer away on this one. It's not historic, but it has been adaptively reused for sure. They opened up the side of the building to create connectivity with a bigger patio space. And I love Last Exit Live. I got to go down there and see a show right when, everyone was kind of coming out of the pandemic, and they had, during the pandemic, had opened up that big side of the building. So everyone could kind of still, stay at a distance and wear their masks and see a show. And it was like, thank you for bringing us back together. They're great over there. That was a special show.
And I just love that space so much. I mean, they bring in all kinds of acts that might not sell at a really large venue. So it's a lot of fun to see things in that space. So
totally. Yep.
All right. So now before we embark on answers, so I know what I'm drinking, Ashley, but what are you drinking?
I am drinking a local beer. I am drinking Wren House Brewery. This is their Arrowleaf one, which is like an India Pale Ale that I really like. But I chose to have a Arizona local Phoenix brewery beer because they are in a adaptive reuse project over on 24th Street and near McDowell. They're close to the new Miracle Mile, which is Phoenix's first commercial historic district. And that is the first neighborhood that really emerged away from the downtown core in the mid-century. And there's this really great collection of mid-century architecture over there. And then over on 24th Street, there's this cute bungalow, which a local brewer is using as their tasting room. And in the back, they built their brewery. So yeah, so I had to give a nod to the local guys.
And
Sure.
yeah, and I love Miracle Mile. All those slanted facades as you drive down just make
Yes.
pitter patter.
Yeah, totally. The arcade style where you sort of walk in and you've got the windows around. It's almost like you walk through a gallery. They have the diagonal ones, which was very characteristic of that time. The zigzags. Yeah, a lot of fun storefronts over there.
Indeed. All right. So now we're ready for some answers. All right. So this is where the magic really happens. So, what is historic preservation? Oh, so this is a freebie because if you chose any letter, you get it right.
Exactly. And I would say that historic preservation is even more than this, right?
Oh, of course.
But this is the core, right? It's identifying, understanding the histories of places. It's and it is enhancing that history through storytelling, what you do, Marshall, with being a historian, through the preservation of its architecture so it can maintain its integrity so more generations can learn from it and benefit from it, and it's protecting architecture. So there's it's so much more, and that's what I've learned through working in preservation is when you're really stewarding history in the public space. There's many ways of doing that, and historic preservation is one piece of it, but it's sort of a partner to so many other ways of managing the resource that is architecture and objects and things like that.
Indeed. All right. So question 2, who works in historic preservation? Oh my gosh. Oh, we're going to have really good scores this week because look at this. It's another freebie. As long as you put down a letter.
All of the above.
Right. Exactly. All of the above.
Yep, all of the above, and even more people. You could say people working in museums, curators, people in government, nonprofit leaders. But there's a lot of people that work in historic preservation to get the work done, and it's all done through partnerships. And there are specialists. There is a special field of study. You can study historic preservation usually, but people find their way to it usually through other passions, whether it's history, architecture, community planning, urban planning, finance, and sort of people that are interested in economic development of cities and towns. There's so many ways into it, and it's a fun industry to be in because you get to meet people from all walks of life.
And that's really, right, I agree. And I think that's kind of the fun of it, is just the all walks of life aspect of it. Everyone brings themselves to it and makes the community better.
Exactly. Because it really is about, how are these stories sitting and reflective of the community presently, right? We're looking back, but we're looking through the lens of where are we today and what can we learn from this history. And so when you're meeting, when people are inputting into these projects, their stories, their history, their interests, what their vision is for their neighborhoods, communities, you get to learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about your neighbors. You learn a lot about your community, the stakeholders. But the work is then ultimately done in partnership between all those people.
All right. Why does historic preservation matter? Oh my gosh. And another trick question because you all get it right.
Yeah, and I would pose, why does historic preservation matter to you or to your community, right? What's important? What's historic within your community, or something, or the character of your community? That's something that you would like to see preserved, right? Sometimes it's not the architecture. Sometimes we have a great collection of small business owners, or we have a really great, we have a lot of people of my faith in this community, or there's all sorts of reasons that you could be interested in seeing preservation applied into your neighborhood. So, but there's,
Indeed.
yeah.
All right. So true or false? Historic preservation preserves public history. That is true. So Ashley, what do you mean by public history?
Well, so with preservation, there's absolutely, you can undergo historic preservation for things that are important to a person. So somebody may say that they want to be preserving their home, right? And that is something that they are choosing. They want to maintain the integrity and the character of their home. However, when we look at what are they preserving and what does it mean to go through the preservation process, it's really what is identifiable to the public, because it is and what provides a public benefit. So usually you don't really see interiors of a home be underneath the designation. You don't see the interiors. You might not see the back of the home, but it's really, what do you see from the street? What's presenting from the public landscape? And then when we talk about people and objects, it's what was that benefit to the public? Is this an important person in time? Are they a notable person that is a part of our history? Okay, there's a public benefit there. We're gonna undergo this preservation process and register or tell the stories of that. But it's really all about what's the public benefit.
Very well said. All right. So what is the new name of the Plogarunda Museum in Phoenix? And it's Sudava. Sudev Vaaki.
Sudev Vaaki Museum. And we all need a sort of education and to learn to say the word. It's a Tohono O'odham word. And this is really exciting news in the preservation community for Phoenix, in that the former Pueblo Grande Museum is going through a name change and a rebrand, and they're really rethinking about how they steward the archaeological site that is there in Phoenix. I guess it's over on Washington and I'm always forgetting sort of the area, but
it's very near the airport.
It's very much near the airport, and it is a Phoenix treasure. It is an archaeological site that talks about our past. It talks about our waterways and about how our canal system and really why we are here in the desert. But what's really exciting about it is that, we think about whose history are we preserving and what stories are we telling. And, we weren't telling the story right by having it Pueblo Grande and calling this archaeological site a ruin, right? That's offensive to people that are here in the valley that are still connected to that site. And so the renaming is a part of a rebranding of, they're looking at signage, they're looking at the stories they're telling, and really saying, how can we really create representation and equity in how we tell the story of our past. And for the city to lead on that is a really exciting advancement. And they are going to do a ceremony for the name changing in October on Indigenous Peoples Day, which is now going to be the second Monday of October. And that is now a citywide holiday, which is also recent news that council voted to make it a citywide holiday where city staff will have the day off and can recognize this important day. So it's just a little bit about how is preservation really looking forward and making sure that we're being inclusive of all stories and telling the story the best way we can. Yeah.
All right. True or false? If something is designated as historic, does that mean it can't be altered, changed, or demolished? And that is
false.
Indeed. I realize I didn't cut off the true or false.
I know. Yeah. but that it's funny you didn't cut it off, because it's the biggest misconception out there, is that if your property is designated and on a historic register, whether it's a national or a local register, that it's sort of preserved in time. It can't be moved, it can't be altered, it can't be changed, and that is not from that is, the furthest from the truth. And it essentially, you can alter it, you can demolish, you can do all sorts of things. But if it is registered, you're going to have to engage with the local offices that honor that registration, to consult with them prior to being permitted to make alterations and such. So you might have to, like, if you're in a historic neighborhood and your house is listed, you may need to, when you're doing a home renovation, go get a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic Preservation Office. Doesn't mean you can't do the renovations. It just means you got to check in with them and have a consult. Really, is what it is a consultation about how can you do the best renovation to preserve the character. But ultimately, it's always up to the owner what they do with their properties.
So you mentioned local and national. So there's a local historic.
There is, yes, and they're very different. Yeah. So the National Trust for Historic Places and works with the National Park Service for our state designation. So if you are designated to the National Register, that will go through your state, and that is and that is here. Now we're getting into the weeds of the details here. It's a lot of organizations that come together to make it happen. However, for an individual and owner, it's facilitated through your state office and through the Park Service. So state parks yes, and that's where that consult would come into play, right? If you were making alterations. However, if you're on a Phoenix register or a City of Yuma register, cities have identified what are their historic assets, right? And they have, a survey of both cultural resources and architectural resources. They survey them to understand what is there within their city, and they have their own registration process. So it's two different registrations, and they have different benefits and different requirements. And when you're undergoing a project, it's good to learn about both. Because they can benefit in two different ways, or they can hinder in two different ways, depending on what you ultimately want to be doing.
All right. So we kind of just got into a little bit, but what does it mean being on the National Register of Historic Places? What does that even mean?
Yeah. So the National Register of Historic Places is an honorific designation. It allows us to have language and to be able to identify what are our historic places here in America. And with that designation and that language, you're then able to work with a lot of partner agencies around how you handle that asset, whether it's a heritage site, a historic place, a district, or an individual property. But it really creates the language, and it's honorific. And it is recognized by the National Park Service. It is facilitated through the Department of our Interior, but it really is honorific in that we are, honoring this as a historic place that has maintained its character and its integrity, and that is worth the honor of being a part of this register.
Very cool.
And you get a plaque. The plaque is very important. Very important. Yes.
I know. I love seeing those buildings that have plaques on them.
I take pictures of the plaques every time I see them. They're just so cool. Very cool. Takes a lot to get them.
And indeed it does. All right. So question 8, what is partial preservation?
Yeah. So this is an exciting one because this is sort of a little bit of how do we grow our city and accommodate all the growth that we need and handle the infill around historic places. So we have historic properties that have a lot of land around it. And as we grow, we need to be building and assigning uses to that land. But partial preservation is sort of a newer concept, but it is a pathway to preserving our history. This example is really exciting because this is very recent here in downtown. This is the City Center Motel that is a part of our roadside culture that exists around Van Buren and Route 60 up along Grand. And so in this City Center Motel, they wanted to just kind of come in and scrape it and just build a new hotel. And a lot of advocates, including, you, Marshall, and all sorts of people came together and said, no, this is important architecture. This is our only example of Googie style architecture really that we have in the city of Phoenix. And we wanted to remember that we used to have this roadside, these motels that had this great signage and cool architecture and all very mid-century. So the Historic Preservation Office for the city of Phoenix worked with this owner and came up with a plan for partially preserving this front building so they could keep the architecture, but then build what they needed to. And that's really when, a lot of historic preservationists are actual urban planners as well, and are interested in community planning and the planning process. And so that's where they came together and they were able to have partial preservation of the motel, because the back building, it wasn't that exciting anyways. And it is Van Buren, close to downtown. We want to be building up. And so partial preservation is a way to do both.
Yeah, and I really love that Googie. I mean, you're right. I mean, this is the only Googie hotel we have. I mean, that really elongated polka chair out there. I mean, so it really is such a highly stylized thing that really that late 50s is when this was really popular. And I mean,
it's really popular, but even as it was sort of sitting and just, it was a travel lodge and, maybe had some minor renovations through the years, people recognized it. And when this was up on the chopping block, people showed up and said, wait a second, this building's cool. We want to see this. I have memories of this. This is interesting. And it was nice to see the community come out and support its preservation for sure.
Right. And basically not say nothing can happen at this site, but it's like you can still have some development on the site, but keeping that connection to the past.
Absolutely. And then there's also the Egyptian hotel that's over on Grand, which they preserved. I mean, they preserved the whole property. They are not historic. They're not on the register. However, they are reusing the property and they brought back this original signage.
Oh my God. I love that sign. They even had to add the top part of the palm tree, which was gone. They added that in. So
it's so cool. I would love to see more of that in Phoenix, more of the signage, being reused. And, we've got some great history there and we're losing it. And it does make our city so interesting.
Indeed. All right. So question 9, what is a facendectomy?
Facadectomy.
Oh, facadectomy.
Facadectomy. Yeah, you said it was painful, and sometimes it is a little bit to watch. It's part of facettism is a area in architecture where just the facade is used, and the inner part of the building is usually demolished and the new building is built, but they preserve just the facade to at least elicit the memory of what it was. And this one's really cool. This is probably the most well-known facadectomy that's happened in recent time here in Phoenix. And that it was the Stewart Motors building, which had this really cool 24-foot rotating Studebaker turntable right in the corner. And this really great spindle that we then knew as Circles Records, which was kind of cool. Then it really became a record shop that definitely knows something about a turntable. And so they preserved that portion of the building so you can still see that architecture. But then when they built it, I'm not sure what it is to date now, but that was the highest residential tower in downtown Phoenix. So
Oh.
facadectomy, yeah. But this would not be partial preservation because they did not actually designate any part of the building as historic. Which
Oh.
provides certain benefits, right? They could have, if they'd done the preservation process for this partial piece, they would have been able to get some incentives and some kickbacks for that. But such a cool space. Did you ever
Indeed.
go when it was circles? Do you
Oh, I
remember?
did indeed. I mean, I love
Yeah,
circles. And I kind of wish they had kept that rotating disc. I mean, and
I
just
know.
I was thinking it's like
Totally.
I mean, talk about a place for a
I know.
party. I
I
mean,
know. I
every
know. Right. And is it
every bridal
snooze
shower,
now?
it
Is
is
it
now
snooze?
snooze.
It's snooze.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I would get on that for my brunch. That'd be like a turntable brunch, just pop on.
exactly,
It'd be like the Compass Room, but down at the ground
Ex-
level.
exactly. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, I'm so glad they're able to preserve at least part of the building.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a concession. If you're asking a preservationist, it was not, it was really disappointing that the building could not be preserved and reused. However, it did introduce facadectomy to our vernacular, and we're now learning all about that and its use. And it's, and it does apply in certain cases.
Indeed. All right. What is adaptive reuse in historic preservation?
Yeah. So a lot of us know and love adaptive reuse projects. Sometimes we know it's adaptive reuse. Sometimes we just know, I just love going to that place, that restaurant, that uh, community center, whatever it may be. And so I wanted to choose those two examples of Sin Muerte and the Van Buren because they're two recent ones. They're downtown. The Van Buren, that is now a really awesome music venue, and it is designated. It did go through the designation process. But it was originally a motors building, a car building, right? And it was, on Van Buren, similar to the motor. We have all those sort of roadside architecture and history, so it is a part of that history. But it is now an awesome music venue. So it's when a building is reused for a new use, and it really is, my favorite way of using architecture, existing architecture, is continuing to use it again and again and again in different ways. And you can have some fun with it, like they did with Sin Muerte. Sin Muerte was a funeral home, and now it's a vegan restaurant, and that's just cool, right? I mean, to go from no death or without death. I don't know what's Sin Muerte, but yeah, it's like you can have fun with it. What was it? What can it be to date? And
Yes, and I love the picture of the history because I mean, it's like the staff know the history of the building.
yeah, they
When
do.
Friday first started, that was Paulina Miller's gallery.
Yeah.
And so when they got the building, they
Mhm.
actually found her last sculpture she was working on. And so it now
They
sits in the
did.
very front. So when you walk in the door,
Oh,
you see this work of art that allies to that history of First
mhm.
Friday, of the
Yes.
building. And so I just love the
I
continuation.
really appreciate, yeah, I appreciate that. That's a great detail because I remember when it was a gallery and going in there,
Exactly. Yeah,
and to
exactly. So
include that in the design for what it is today. So smart and
yeah,
cool.
I mean, I love the fact they were able to
Yeah.
do that and get to
Yeah.
continue that story. And the
Mhm.
staff are happy at the drop of a hat. If you ask about it, they're willing to tell it to you. So
Yeah,
everybody,
I actually, yeah, just wandered in after a Suns game one day, and they hadn't even opened yet. And one of the people that were there just took me around and just started talking about the building, and it was great. And I think that probably helps all the people that work there, have more of a connection to where they're working and to each other, by having a story that they can tell, and it not just being some box that was built and they put, the restaurant in it. It has this history that they're kind of, now a part of.
right. And continuing and just another, I mean, basically stewards of that building for whatever
Exactly.
its next use is.
Exactly. And that's why one of the best things about adaptive reuse is that it just connects people to spaces really nicely, and it makes something that might not be usable for the community something that they can connect to and be proud of. Um, and so, yeah, I love when those stories come together and you get to hear them.
Indeed. All right. And so now we also are embarking on a new segment with Ashley, is old or
Oh,
historic. And
yeah.
so some of you might know this building, but it recently had a big birthday and got all decorated up. And so she'll tell us about the Davis and Gladys Wright House.
Well, there is a lot to be told about this property. We could have a whole session just about this property. However, this is a really, fun story to tell, to really drive home how the community matters in preservation. This is David and Gladys Wright house. This was Frank Lloyd Wright's home that he built for his son. And it really speaks to what was going on. It's located in Arcadia, to what Arcadia was like at the time. It's lifted up so he could see over, the orchards that were there of these citrus groves, right? And to give him that view. And it's this really awesome property. I mean, it's circular, it's lifted, it looks awesome with balloons on it. And it was going to be demolished. They were going to demolish it and subdivide up this lot for, some, mansions in Arcadia. And a demolition contractor went to go perform this demolition, and he said, "Is this right? Is this the right place?" And it's like, so he recognized, wait, this is really interesting architecture. I don't know if I'm supposed to demolish this. So he called the building department in the city of Phoenix and said, I have this permit to demolish, and I'm just checking in to make sure I have the right address and information and all of that. And that alerted the city that they had wanted, that this was on sort of their list of important places that had not been protected. And so it started, there was a big community rush to say, we want to save this building. We do not want to see this demolished. And a lot of people came together. It was like the meeting of the mayors. It was Mayor Stanton at the time and previous mayors all coming together and saying, we need to get this landmarked and do a landmark designation for the city of Phoenix. And so they were able to vote, landmark it, work with the developer to sell the property, to pass it along to a group that had that was a conservation minded, and steward the building. But what's interesting is that it is not historic. So technically it's not. That landmark designation never was adopted. They initiated the process, but it was never landmarked. And it also is not on the National Register. So I think there is interest in having it designated. But it's really interesting. Is it important? Is it character? Absolutely. Would we like to see it designated? Yes. But is it technically historic? It's not. So.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, and then, all right. So if anyone ever goes to the Phoenician, when you drive in, you see this structure. So is this old or historic?
Well, I'll let you answer that one because I know you're a fan of this Joe Cocky Inn.
Mid-20s. I mean, Joe Cocky Inn, it's basically Adobe and was one of the early resorts. And so I love the fact that they've continued keeping the structure, even though you have the Phoenician resort, the driveway going right by, but they keep this as a testament to that history.
They do.
And they keep it maintained. I mean, the fact that it's Adobe, right? Robert T. Evans. I mean, it's like every piece of this has such a great story.
Yes. And they've addressed a lot of modernization in the preservation of this property. So this is a designated property, and this is on the register. And they have modernized it. It didn't have air conditioning, right? When it was built, it now has air conditioning, and allows them to, keep it as a testament to these really great ranch properties that were in Paradise Valley and Scottsdale. And, we had a lot of interesting people through the past century that would come and stay at these properties, and they're a part of that history too. So I love that they preserved it and have incorporated it into their grounds.
Indeed. Oh, and I forgot to switch slides. So there we have
Oh,
Chicago.
yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
All right. So old or historic?
Historic.
Indeed, exactly. So this is
Yeah.
the Swindle Inn that really goes back to when people were traveling across the country. Not everybody could stay anywhere they chose.
Mhm. Yep.
And so really this building was built right after Arizona became a state back in 1913 and was listed in the Green Book for African Americans who were traveling across the country, or even looking for musicians who were playing in one of the many venues back then in town. They could stay.
Yep. Yeah, and telling that story, even though it's a story of a segregated city, right, and of a segregated time, it's important that we tell those stories, so we can remember that is our history, and we need to reckon with that, recognize it. I'm glad you chose this one for this, because the Swindle Tourist Inn is, it's unassuming, right? From the front, you'd think it's just a bungalow, but it has so much history in it. And it's now so visible. The light rail runs right along it.
Right.
I officed next door to it for years out of Cahoots. And
Oh, that's right. I forgot Cahoots was right there.
yeah, they were. Yeah. And there was a coffee shop there. And yeah, and even at that time, I don't think I even understood the history that is there, that now that I've read the surveys, there's, for City of Phoenix, they keep a really great archive of all the surveys that they've done that give you more information. And they have a story map for their African American survey properties of what's really important to this community. And they were able to identify about 20 properties that are now registered. And so they have a great story map, and it tells the story. But yeah, you wouldn't know looking, but there's a ton of history there.
Indeed. All right. And so now we're going all the way out to Mesa, to what is now the Mesa Grande Cultural Park.
Right.
And
Not
so
a burn.
exactly. I mean, right. And part of the reason why I wanted this was because, when you look back at the Valley's history, you can find stories on AZ Memory Project about kids riding their bicycles over these hills of dirt because no one knew what they were.
Right.
And
right.
so we mentioned,
and now it's an archaeological site.
Exactly. I mean, and Aquanetta was involved in realizing this place was special. So even she had her own hand in helping preserve this space. And Mesa took it over and has turned it into this really educational, fun space to be in.
Right.
Where you can learn so much history.
Yeah. And that's really, how preservation works in the community, right? It's the archaeologists, they go in, they tell you, how was this built? Why is this here? How does this, what is the history related to this site that is no longer in use? And then historians, preservationists, they take that history and they just layer it. How does it impact us today? How can we utilize this today to make sense for our community and tell that story? And so, yeah, that's amazing that they're, it's like the Kartchner Caverns, right? Like where it was like
right.
that natural wonder was found just through like kids, going out and caving to drink and all of that. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And that's such an amazing place to visit as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
All right. So I always like to end with, how did people do? Because, it's not necessarily how many you got right. I mean, there were lots of freebies in because, there was a lot to talk about. And historic preservation, I think, is so important to just kind of who we are as a state and telling our story of progress.
Yeah.
And so let me know how you did. I love to see that. And as people are responding to that, Ashley, let's talk a little about some of the resources that
Oh,
are
great.
available.
Yeah. So there's a lot of resources online. Preservation is not in the dark ages. It is online and accessible to the public. But these three resources are really great for finding out about events, about what is registered, about the histories around neighborhoods. So Arizona Preservation Foundation, they're statewide. They're looking at and they have incredible webinar series that are open to the public for a donation. I highly recommend getting on their list because they're going to keep you informed about what's happening statewide. But then they also are able to, drill it down even to, smaller communities throughout Arizona. They also host our state historic preservation conference that happens in October. And that's a really great time for everybody to come together and talk about what's going on in their neck of the woods. And then Preserve Phoenix, that's the organization I'm associated with. And we are specific to Phoenix and preservation efforts that are happening here. We mainly function as an advocacy organization. So if you need help on what's going on in your neighborhood, or you want to understand something about a historic property or a historic district, we have a contact form there. And then Modern Phoenix is just fabulous. Allison King is the godmother of mid-century modern architecture, and throughout Phoenix, and that is the repository for photos, stories, history, events. Yeah, gotta follow her. And yeah, just for the stories and the photos alone. So those are
And
good
yeah,
resources. Mhm.
so yeah, I mean, those are great resources, and Arizona Preservation Association will basically can link you to your local community if there's a preservation group there, because there's a variety of groups all over
Yes,
the state doing this. So that's kind of
there are.
they're that gateway to so much more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Find your people, right? It's your neighborhood associations. They tend to, especially in the historic districts, they're going to come together on different preservation matters. These larger organizations can absolutely connect you. And yeah, just stalk around and see, online what interests you, because there's a lot of ways of being involved, whether it's conservation, sometimes the more parks related, archaeology and history, versus advocacy and being a part of new development. There's all sorts of different ways of participating.
Indeed. And Ashley, I want to thank you so much for participating with us here on Arizona History Happy Hour
Thank
as we get a
you.
chance to kind of celebrate the fact that May is Preservation Month.
I know. Happy Historic Preservation Month.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I should have baked you a cake.
Thank you. Oh,
Aw.
no, no, no. That is fine. That is fine. This month's theme, this year's theme is people saving places. So I just appreciated the opportunity to come on and talk about the work that I'm doing. And, because it's about the people that are doing this work, and you do it for your communities, right? So I just love that you have this space where we can talk about our history and connect and educate, and have fun and have a beer. And I love it. So thank you for
Exactly.
inviting me.
Indeed. Well, have a great rest of your
Yeah,
night, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
thank you. Yeah, cheers. All right. See you soon.
Bye. Much for coming on, Ashley, and sharing a little bit about yourself, as well as sharing your passion and kind of how you became an accidental preservationist, which is a really cool story. So, thank you so much for that. And as we get ready to go into our next segment, which I like to call basically focusing on From the Vault. So things you might drive by not even knowing what it is. And so tonight we are going to chat a little bit about this building. Now you might not even know where this is because you never see it anymore from this angle because it's now on a one-way going south. In fact, it's actually just, it's right there at 829 North 1st Avenue, and it is now Barcoa. And so tonight we're actually doing an event there. So hence that's why this is being pre-recorded. And so one of the things I love about this space is that it's called the Knights of Pythias Hall or Lodge or Castle. But, that's kind of a little bit of a misnomer because even from the very get-go, that the first floor was always intended to be a business. The top floors were basically club spaces. And so it was originally built by the Knights of Pythias, but it was with that idea of community. There were other lots of lodges, of community spaces that use this. And so one of the things I really like is the fact that it was intended initially to be a community space. And that didn't change. Through the war efforts and things, they would hold dances here and they would advertise public is welcome. Everybody show up for live music, dance classes. They would do a variety of educational presentations there for the community. And so it was really kind of a hub of people coming together to just make the community a better place. And that still holds true today. So if I don't see you this evening, hopefully I will see you soon as we get a chance to take a look at some other spaces and talk about Arizona in a whole different way. And so now you'll see why I always say, if you're watching on Facebook, please click on that share button because we are bringing lots of Arizona history stories and love and sharing that around. And so next week, I am excited to say we have the Asian Chamber coming on, talking about kind of the work they do, kind of the Asian district, as kind of a little primer to what people can expect from the luncheon we are doing over at the Stone Tofu House the following week. So be sure and check that out. That is the same bat time, same bat channel, 7 o'clock right here, wherever you're watching. And one of the things I love is the fact that please reach out to me. I love to hear from you and share your stories and incorporate them. And so I want to give a shout out to Chris and Cole, who did that great video at the very onset, as well as PJ for keeping me lubricated. And there we go. Oh, there, it doesn't mind the silver as much. So there we go. From Historic Brewing, which does help fund preservation. So as we say goodnight, we are going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to show a video from the Pioneer Cemetery down near the Capitol, because we've mentioned fraternal lodges, and they were some of the folks who were buried in this cemetery. So enjoy, and I will see you all next week.
With the growth of genealogy companies, people are looking for more and more ways to research their family histories. Well, there's one place in Phoenix where you're able to go back 130 years to find ancestors. Samantha Chow introduces us to the people that are ensuring this place exists for future generations.
Sometimes I wonder, what is the point? If nobody's coming to visit, why are we maintaining cemeteries that no longer seem to have a function? Cemeteries aren't for the dead, they're for the living. And usually after a couple generations, the family stops visiting. So that's when deterioration and problems start to happen. But there's such an interest in genealogy today. You can't just go on Ancestry.com and find everything. There's a lot of things there, but you need to come to the cemetery to get the details. These may be the only record that they were ever on this planet.
The Pioneer Cemetery Association is a keeper of historic cemeteries. They do research. They also help out with this cemetery, which is the Pioneer and Military Memorial Park, and we just try to watch over.
Today I'm cleaning a grave site. It's of a little 5-year-old girl. Her name was Amy, and the monument to her, it's not just a headstone, It looks like a little cradle around her grave.
We know how to look at it and know that it was never put together. It was just kind of sat there. This one we're taking all apart, cleaning, then we'll use a setting compound and set it together.
1 degree off. I can look at.
So it'll stay in one piece.
They brought me in to work on some of the more complicated problems.
Yeah, we need to get some boards.
Sometimes it's like a jigsaw puzzle without the box.
I think I can do that.
You're working with pieces that sometimes are just small fragments. We're repairing them with an epoxy, and then whether it's a crack or just a huge chunk of the stone missing will all be replicated with a lime-based patching material. We'll do our best to make the patches not so obvious. We're not making them look new, we're just trying to preserve everything we have and make them stable.
So when you see something bagged, that means it's been worked on.
At some point, somebody's going to come in here looking for this information, and it'll be there for them if we preserve it.